thank you everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. A few quick words before I turn it over to Jack is that, one, if you are tweeting, we are live streaming this on Twitter. So the hashtag ARL Digital Destiny will have it incorporated into our Twitter stream. There will be, when we do our breakout sessions, the breakout will include people who are watching on Twitter, and they will be able to participate. And then last, since you are here and we are streaming this, just want to make sure you're aware and you are agreeing to the fact that you're being filmed. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jack for a quick introduction.
Welcome. If the video was working, behind me be a photo of a Maasai warrior on the plains of Africa. That Maasai warrior will have a cell phone in his hands, and he'll have access to Google. This is 2018. He will have access to as much information as the President of the United States did in 2000, President Bill Clinton. Demonstrates two things: the democratization of access to information and the exponential growth of that information. The world is changing around us. Oxford University just published a study that said 47% of the jobs that exist today are in jeopardy to be put out, be eliminated in the next 5 to 10 years. This is not something new. In 1870, 50% of the population of the United States worked in farming. In 1976, 20% of the population was in manufacturing. Today, less than 1% is in farming, and less than 1% is in manufacturing. In 2000, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, publishing their job categories, did not have a job category for information technology. Think about that a minute. 2000, 18 years ago. So change is taking place, and taking place rapidly. New generations are coming into the workforce, and they're going to be different than the current generation. My granddaughter down in North Carolina, Charlotte, 6 years old, life expectancy is expected to be 100 to 110 years. And the one reason we don't live that long is because we have a disease, which I'm suffering from, which is aging. And they're going to find a way to eradicate that. Charlotte's going to find that in her life, she'll go to college, get an education, and find she's probably not working in the field she was trained in. She's going to come out, she's going to have a large college debt. It's going to prevent her from having a family, buying a house, and then she's going to say, how long am I going to be in this occupation? And she's probably going to change occupations at least a half dozen times to a dozen times. That's what's going to happen. So this is discussion we're going to have today is going to deal with this and other subjects. But I have to pose the question to you: is the paradigm changing from where we learn to work to where we work to learn? Christian Dorsey, Vice Chair, Arlington County Board.
Thank you, Jack. You know, for those people, we're doing this on Twitter Live, I think for the very first time, streaming this on Twitter Live, and for those people, they may not be able to see this packed room that we have, but a hearty welcome to all of you here in the room and the thousands of people who are watching, streaming on whatever device, no matter how large, no matter how small. I am so thrilled to see you all here tonight to take part in this conversation. What is this, the fourth in the Digital Destiny series? Seventh? Seventh. Time flies when you are having great conversations. This one on the future of work holds a special place in my heart. It marries a lot of academic and professional interests that I've had before becoming a public servant, so I'm thrilled that you all are taking part in a conversation. And you know, that term, the future of work, very values neutral. I'm sure for many people, they would look at the same topic and think about it in terms of, when will the robots come and steal my job? They may have a very alarmist, a very concerned outlook on what the future holds. And certainly I'm not here to say that there's no reason to be alarmed, because right now we're in the midst, if the 20th century was all about the Industrial Revolution, we are clearly in the midst of a digital revolution. And revolutions bring fast, rapid, in many cases, disruptive change. But as much as it may feel like what we are going through is unprecedented and different, In fact, we've seen this, and we've seen dimensions of this before. If you'll consider the case of telephony for a minute, think about telephonic communication. Born in the 19th century, we had the ability to talk to people over telephone wires who lived in the neighborhood, and then over time, eventually across the country, and then eventually, over more time, across the world. But if you'll remember back, and I know a few of you who are here are old enough to remember this with me, there was a time when in order to complete that very action, it wasn't just about you and the little device that you had in your hand. It was an actual person, telephone operator, who had to actually complete the circuit to connect the call. And the other person had to be there on the other end to receive it for anything to happen. That's the way telephone operations really occurred for much of the 20th century. That's the way it worked. And in fact, as late as 1984, when AT&T broke up, when pretty much the notion of making calls manually through manually assisted means kind of went away, we had 40,000 people, mostly women, engaged in that occupation, telephone operators. And even though it was noteworthy, it was not unique that some of those people in that job had held that job for 50 years or more. These were long-standing, pillared jobs in our community. They're virtually gone. There are fewer than 2,000 left in the country. And it's not that they're actually connecting calls in typical ways. They're providing operator-assisted calls for people who need assistive listening help. But we have fewer than 2,000 of those jobs left in our entire country. But what's happened in its place? It's not that all of those people were disrupted out of an ability to earn a livelihood. Even though the shocks were severe and it took some time to really respond, people were able to get jobs eventually in call centers. People were able to get jobs through mobile technology in the production and the sales and the repair of mobile phones that we have to replace once a year. The whole point is, things came from that produced new opportunities. And I am not sanguine enough to say that every disruption, every dislocation will easily produce something on the outside that is better than what was before. I can't say that, I can't predict it. But if we look at that experience of telephonic communication, we know that the disruption and the change that comes from revolutionary activity doesn't necessarily have to be all bad. And one of the things that I think is making our current conversation such one of fear as opposed to one of hope and how do we embrace the change is that we don't talk about it well enough. You know, periodically we'll hear about some great technological innovation and we'll think, oh my goodness, that new artificial intelligence thing is gonna completely make fake news possible everywhere. Let's stop it. Without contemplating, without taking a step back to figure out what are the ways in which we can, from a public policy standpoint, from an academic standpoint, think proactively about how technology can be a way to move us forward. And those are the conversations that I am so thrilled that Arlington is embracing, is leaning into. How do we think about this in advance so that when change happens to us, we are not ill-equipped to deal with it? It doesn't become the disruption that completely rocks our world because we have thought about it well in advance. And there are just a few things that I'd like to leave you with. Again, don't want to suggest that this is all easy and that disruption and displacement and change is not without pain. There are a lot of things that we are going to have to think about very differently, specifically when it comes to the future of work. As we consider the ways in which people don't go to offices like they used to, they're able to work remotely, they're able to use all manner of technology. This is going to cause us from a public policy standpoint to rethink the way we have done things probably for multiple generations. For example, buildings that house workers Those are capitalized over the course of multiple generations. Well, if we need fewer of those buildings to house workers, or those buildings can house more workers in a smaller footprint, what does that mean for planning? What does that mean for the economics of communities? What about our transportation infrastructure? We talk a lot about transportation. It was built on the whole idea that you had a bunch of workers getting up and going to work at 9 and coming home at 5. We've got to rethink that. But it's not just those things. We've got to rethink the whole notion of mobility, because supply chains are changing. It's no longer that you create an industry in Arlington and then your children will be able to work in that industry when they grow up. Things move, things change. But you know what? Families are not so incredibly mobile as this revolution is showing us industries can be. Families sometimes need to be rooted a lot longer for many reasons, whether it be the availability of jobs or the inability to sell homes or find decent places to stay. And then, of course, schools, public education. How long have we been, as Jack alluded to, having a school system that prepared people for the industries that we expected to be there later and for the skills we expected that they would need to have for those industries later? Well, if those are changing at such a rapid clip in ways that we've never envisioned, the very notion of how we deliver public education needs to change to some degree. I don't know exactly what it looks like, but if we avoid it, we can't stop it from happening. We have to embrace it, be thoughtful, and that way change can be something that we can not only manage, but we can also thrive from. So I think you're going to have a great conversation tonight with high-level thinkers who are going to help us advance this conversation. And the great thing about these Digital Destiny events, all of you can bring your thoughts, perspectives to help inform us, because we truly want our digital destiny to be one that we don't run away from, but that we capitalize for the best possibilities for not only current Arlingtonians, but future Arlingtonians. So thank you all very much. Turning it back over to Jack. Turning it back over to Holly.
Thank you very much, Christian. I appreciate your comments and your attendance. I want to start out by talking about a group that might or might not be here. I had the opportunity last week to go speak with some students of the REAP program, and that is a program run through Arlington Public Schools that allows English language learners to learn language, and then also giving them skills to find work. And so I took this event and I asked a series of questions, and I just wanted to share with you some of their thoughts. So these are people who are primarily new to this country and bringing some of their culture and trying to learn our culture, and I wanted to share with you what their thoughts are. So one of the things that they talked about was that technology is helping humans learn, but it can't replace us. We still need to think, and we need to be involved in making decisions. We're recognizing that technology is going to create a boom of jobs, but in order to keep up with those jobs, there needs to be training, and you need to continue to train to be able to move forward. We talked about when you're going to apply to a job, you're not doing it on a computer. They're doing it on a phone today. You're maybe going to do it on a phone, or maybe you won't even have to do it at all. Maybe someone will be able to know what your skills are and be able to come and find you. We talked about, well, if you have this digital presence and employers can see what you're doing, what happens with privacy and whose responsibility that is to help take care of your privacy. We talked about the phone and how it can recognize attributes of your body and your blood type and potential any other issues, and how that could be shared with your doctor. And we talked about cloud storage and how important that is for medicine and what that actually means. We came back to the importance of how the human aspect in healthcare, that still needs to be continued. And then we talked about government's role in protecting your privacy and your security and helping to make sure that the education is provided so that we can continue to keep Arlington the way that we know and love it today. So just a couple of thoughts I wanted to share before we turn it over to the discussion with our panelists, who I'm thrilled to have. So we're going to be focusing, there's so many different things that we're talking about in the future of work. We're going to be focusing with Anne on education. We're going to be focusing on healthcare with Yahya. We're going to be focusing on what businesses are looking for with Steve. And we're going to be focusing on what the government, what we're looking for with Jason. So with that, I'll ask the first question to Anne, as I turn my page. Bear with me. So Anne, as I'm turning the page, I'm going to talk about, the beyond boundaries. So Virginia Tech has recently worked on creating a vision statement for 2047 called Beyond Boundaries. And the questions that were asked were talking about what does it mean to be a global land-grant university? What does the campus of the future look like? And what type of financing models could we have? So my question to you to start off is, how do you see the role of the university changing in the context to prepare people for the future of work?
Great. Is it okay if I stand up?
Absolutely.
Okay. I can't talk unless I'm walking. So, hi everybody. Thanks so much for coming tonight, and it's great to be here. Jack and Holly, thanks so much for your great work preparing this, and it's a pleasure to meet all of my fellow panel members as well. So I'm at Virginia Tech. Whoop. What's that? Oh, woo! Okay, all right. I thought maybe my mic was off or something. Okay. So at Virginia Tech, we are thinking hard about the future of higher education. And I want to preface my comments first with a few statistics. So first of all, in 1973, 28% of the jobs in the United States required some form of secondary higher education. In 2020, 68% of jobs will require some form of secondary higher education. In 2020, there will be approximately 55 million jobs that are available. About 30 million of those will be replacement jobs, but another 24 million of those jobs will be new jobs. We don't know what they'll be, right? If you look at kindergartners today, by the time they graduate from high school, 65% of the jobs that we have today will no longer exist. So what are we preparing our kids for? What are we preparing our students for? What is the role of higher education in preparing people for this massive change and this acceleration of change that comes with technology? So at Virginia Tech, we've started this visioning exercise called Beyond Boundaries. And it's trying to grapple with not only the cost of education, the access of education, and the relevance of education, and the global world, the global connectivity where we live. So thinking about a land grant in the global context. And there's a couple of different dimensions that I want to talk about with respect to the future of work. So one aspect of this is, how do we prepare students? Are we preparing students to go out and take specific jobs? Are we preparing them to navigate a changing landscape? Are we preparing them to be creative innovators who can create the future, right? And what does that look like? So we have this concept that we've developed called VT-shaped learning, right? And it means that not only do students get some type of disciplinary depth, so they're studying engineering, or they're studying economics, or they're studying English, but they're also getting breadth, right? They're reaching out and they're learning about policy implications. If they're an English student, they're learning about STEM, they're learning about technology. They're learning about data-informed decision-making. They're learning, and I say data-informed, not data-driven, right? We need to be in control of the data that we're using, right? We need to be smart users, smart consumers of data, critical thinkers, right? So trying to prepare students to use the data that's at their fingertips. I think Jack started off by showing us that people today on their cell phone have more information available to them than the President of the United States had a few decades ago, right? So how do we use that data wisely, in a smart way, in a thoughtful way, in an empathetic way, in a moral and ethical way, as well as an effective way, right? So these are things that we're grappling with at Virginia Tech to try to think about how we prepare students to be not only disciplinarily focused, ready to take on a certain sector, but also to have this breadth of holistic problem engagement, to take on the problems of the world that are we use a lot of different terms, wicked problems, sticky problems, right? The problems that you can't solve with just one type of discipline or one type of focus, right? You need partnerships, you need collaborative thinking. So that's one aspect of what we're working on at Virginia Tech. Another aspect of what we're working on is how do we deliver education, and what is the product that we're delivering. We typically think about this in terms of students come in, they move into their dorms, they're there for 4 years, they're a full-time student, they get a degree that is based upon credits, they pay a lot of money to do that as well, right? But that doesn't work for everyone, and in fact, as the world changes, that's working less and less and less for everyone, right? Especially for students who are first generation, students who are coming to a college education for maybe the first time or coming from economic circumstances that are more challenging. Oftentimes they can't leave home for that amount of time, or they can't disengage from the family or from their community for that amount of time. So how do we reach the students we need to, What do we deliver besides just a 4-year degree or a certificate of some kind? And so we're really giving this some creative thought at Virginia Tech. Thinking about micro-credentialing, thinking about more online education and what that looks like, thinking about how you blend online with in-person education, thinking about experiential education and how we embed students in circumstances and opportunities to allow them to use a broader range of skills as well. So we're contemplating these efforts of how we deliver, what we're preparing students for, how we prepare them in this beyond boundaries world. And beyond boundaries has the implications of not only beyond geographic boundaries, but beyond disciplinary boundaries, beyond the boundaries of how we consider a traditional student. Education now, we should be thinking of it as continuous learning. People coming to the educational experience of higher education throughout their life as opportunities change and as circumstances change as well. So I'll stop there and look forward to hearing from my colleagues.
Yahya, Shaihk, doctor, Johns Hopkins University, working at the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. We're talking about connected health and why that's important. Healthcare industry is changing rapidly. The model we have today may not be the model that's sustainable in the future. We're going more to a retail, boutique approach. Talk to us a little bit about what you see that your vision is and how that's going to affect employment in the future with regard to healthcare.
Sure. Thank you so much for having us here, and thank you so much for attending. And thank you so much for actually being the first one to stand up and do this, because I can't sit down and talk. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to stand up too. No pressure on the two of you guys. So the question is about the future of the healthcare worker. And one way to look at this is ask ourselves, what is a healthcare worker now? Who do we think of as a healthcare worker? And erase all of that. Because when we think of physicians, when we think of nurses, when we think of community health workers, well, the way the introduction happened to this forum was that there are jobs whose names didn't exist, but then now they're all of a sudden there because they're specialized jobs that are much needed in the environment that we have. Well, that's exactly what's happening with healthcare right now. I can talk about what's going to happen in 2047, 2050, but there are things happening right now where there are jobs that are starting to gel and starting to codify into something that we can't even name. And I'll give you an example. We'll work through an actual vision, right? So are there any physicians here in the audience? No. That's Dr. Gibbons, by the way. Me and him are partners in crime. We are both part of the Connected Health Task Force at the FCC. We were both part of Johns Hopkins, both part of Greystone Consulting as well. But it doesn't look like there should be doctors. Are there people here that know somebody who has diabetes? A lot of folks, right? Okay, so typically one of the first symptoms that you see when somebody has diabetes is they might start feeling really thirsty, they might drink a lot of water, they might go to the bathroom a lot, they might feel hungry, and they have these constellation of symptoms. If it doesn't progress too much, then they will come to the doctor, and the doctor will say, maybe you're peeing too much because glucose is coming out in your urine. Let me do a blood check on you. So they will do a blood test, they will do the other physical exam, and then the A1C will be tested, or the blood sugar will be tested, and then it will come back high. Well, imagine a scenario where you're living in a smart community, you're living in a smart city, you're living in a smart home. And in this smart home, there's a toilet. In fact, this actually exists. There's a toilet that can quantify how many times you go to the bathroom. In fact, there are toilets right now that will check your microbiome for you, and for people with Crohn's disease, it will actually tell you when your microbiome is shifting because of stress, so you can actually get to the doctor and prevent a flare-up before it actually happens. But we're not there yet. Let's talk about somebody with diabetes. They're peeing a lot. They get up in the middle of the night, they have sensors in their bed that can quantify how many times they get out of bed. And by the way, those sensors in the bed and that toilet that's installed is installed by somebody who got a college degree. They got a college degree in smart homes, IoT for health inside the home. They got that degree from a college, community college in Arlington, and they learned how to install these IoT connected homes that are specifically targeted towards health. Thanks. And once they're able to install this, a person who has excessive thirst, who has restlessness at night because they have to go pee, all of a sudden that gets quantified. In the morning, they wake up, happens several times at night, they wake up in the morning, they're making their breakfast, their Alexa turns on. Alexa says, Miss Smith, Seems that you've been waking up at night quite a bit. Seems like you're urinating quite a bit. Might I advise that we have a blood test done? We can have a community health worker that can come to your door and have a conversation with you. And Ms. Smith says, sure, I'm free after 12 today. I'll have them come over. 12 o'clock, a self-driving car, a Tesla perhaps, comes to the door. A community health care worker gets out. He has a blood test kept with him. And this person actually also got a degree from a local community college. And community college, thanks, the degree was related to lab services, administers the lab test on the spot, right there. The assessments are done, physical exam, retinal exam, takes it back to the car. In a matter of an hour, the lab test is done, the results are back, and yes, the person has A1C of 7.5. They do have diabetes. Alexa calls again. Miss, your doctor has reviewed your test results and is recommending metformin. Might we deliver the metformin by drone? Might we be able to do it this evening? And Ms. Smith says, of course, that sounds wonderful. 2 hours later, their phone call comes in. There's a drone delivery for metformin. So picks up the phone, gets to the door, and all of a sudden they have the medication. Guess who's controlling the drone? Was somebody who actually learned to drive drones, perhaps online by playing video games. Guess who wrote the entire informatics platform for that particular home? Maybe somebody who did a Coursera data science certification, and they were able to put this together in conjunction with perhaps a nurse and a physician, and now they have a startup that does this kind of thing. Well, who is a healthcare worker all of a sudden shifts? Is the drone operator a healthcare worker? They're participating in the healthcare environment, but they're not what we'd call a doctor, but they're participating in health. Is the person who wrote the code for the home environment any different than the person who administers the logic, the evidence-based logic in the clinical environment? There's absolutely no difference. It's evidence-based decision-making inside the home. It's evidence-based decision-making inside the clinic. Well, who is a healthcare worker is going to change? Where they get their information, how they get trained, all of this is going to change. And my time is completely up. But this is some of the visions that we'd see that are actually starting to form. The kinds of identities are not named yet, but they're all starting to emerge. Thank you so much for having us.
Your time is not up. You'll come back. Don't worry. But you gave me a very nice lead-in to ask Steve some questions. And you talked a lot about automation. And I've heard that a number of jobs. Actually, I've heard somewhere that 57% of jobs are going to be disrupted by automation. And so what I'm wondering, though, Steve, what you're hearing, when you think about the type of worker that a business is going to and companies are looking for, are they thinking this way? Are they thinking this far in the future? Kind of along the lines of what Anne had talked about. Yeah. What are they looking for in a worker? What are they looking for in an employee?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing I would say is, people of planet Earth, don't be afraid. We've gone through this year after year after year. There's nothing new here, right? There's no newness here, so move on. I lived through 2000 when I thought the world would come to an end, and I sat down with my kids, they were only 12, and shared a glass of champagne just in case it did end at that time. So let's not be too dramatist about this. What's going to happen, and what business around the world, the globe, the planet thinks is going to happen is common sense. There's going to be nothing new here, except the way that we get married. Not to each other, but to technology. And the workplace, whether the workplace be physical or virtual, is going to be the nexus. It's going to be the thing that brings the human to the technology. But right now, what happens is when you turn up to work, Jack has already bought the technology and the program inside that box. And you're turning up to operate it, to achieve an aim for the company, to win. Not in the future. You and the machine are going to adapt each other as the company adapts and differentiates to stay ahead of your competitors. So the relationship, the marriage now, is the workplace. The nexus is that synergy that's going to occur. Now, how can I provide some evidentiary proof of this? Yes, I can. Bring a 7-year-old in here and without any forewarned knowledge, ask the kid to connect all this stuff together. And they'll do it. And that is a human going to a piece of technology, causing synergy, adapting and solving a problem to get there. And that There's nothing new here, right? Now, on the other part of it, to steal a quote from The Matrix, I actually remember that quote where one of the guys said, never send a human to do a robot's job. Right? It's really important that we actually do that very, very quickly. Let's get out of the business of doing what we shouldn't be doing, because it's inefficient. Using our bodies, our brains, our senses, we're ignoring this, potentially, because we're using these things that robots can do. And this is the AI debate. AI is simply getting a machine to do something in a far more efficient way than we can do, in a less hazardous way, and in a far more profitable way for us. So let me give you an example of how this works in practice. In DC, we have a company, it's the world's second largest legal firm that deals in copyright and patent infringement. It's big money, is that area. And they called us in and said, look, can you talk to us about the types of people we should hire, the skill sets? I said, no. What we want to talk to you about is, what's your future vision for how you'll differentiate yourself in the market space, in the legal space? And they were, well, we're going to buy some laptops and we're going to do some, it's nonsense. We need to differentiate. This is what we did. What is the problem that we're trying to solve here? The problem they were trying to solve is that ultimately they're going to end up trying to make a case to 12 men and women about a copyright technical issue or a patent infringement technical issue, which they're not au fait with, and therefore on the day that jury can go either way. So we brought in Pixar, and Pixar 3D immersed this copyright infringement and put the jury inside it and got them to walk around, it was a clock, got them to walk around the clock in 3D and the jury saw straight away, this is a clear copyright infringement here, because then they put them in the other person's clock, and there it was. And it was something like a $100 million lawsuit that they won on behalf of their client, simply by not defining the technology they would use, but by bringing the imagination and the human and pushing the robot out where the robot should be to be used to come up with the profitability. And that's the future. It's as simple as that. It's just a way of thinking, and the marriage is the synergy, the nexus. The workplace is the nexus. It will always remain, whether it's virtual, we stay at home, we stay in bed, we stay on the toilet to do our work, or whether it's physical, because humans do actually need to sort of talk to each other every now and again and touch and do things like that, have social graces. So how many in the room, put your hand up if you've had a mentor or a coach or an advisor in life? How many of that? Right. Keep your hand up if they were under the age of 7. So here's the message. Don't get left in the digital dust. Talk to a 7-year-old. Because that's where the innocence, and you have to have innocence in this future, because innocence asks those questions which all of us, either as parents or as individuals, have just stopped and had an epiphany, got, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. So add the innocence to the technology, to the nexus of the marriage, and you will get the future. There's no complication stuff here, so chill out.
Thank you. I want to recognize Ms. Libby Garvey's here today. Thank you so much, Libby, for attending as Arlington County Board member. Jason Drake, representing Arlington County government. It's changing. Theory used to be you came to work at government, you worked 30 years, you got your retirement, you got your PIN, you left. Not the case anymore, is it? Things are changing around us, and there have to be a different way to deal with workers. We're doing telework, that's sort of passé now, but new arrangements have to be made. And Holly talked to the REAP program last week, and they're coming up and saying, maybe there is no formal work relationship in the future. Give us your vision of the next 10 years, in 10 years, what's going to happen to employment in Arlington County, the government side. What are you looking for?
Yeah. So when we look at, as generations have changed over the years, my parents went and took a job, and they were at that job for 30 years, 40 years, and then they retired. And we're even seeing this now where workers are coming in, and it's almost like your Duke basketball or North Carolina basketball, and you get them for 3 years and they're gone. And so what you do with them during those 3 or 4 or 5 years that you have them is critical. So how they come in, how we bring them up to speed, how quickly we can do that and onboard them and get them the right training. You know, when we're talking about automation and leveraging automation, every organization is going to have a little bit different automation or a different robot, a different widget. So even though they're going to come out of school with the good skill sets and the critical thinking and some empathy built in, you're going to have to train them and get them up to speed pretty quickly on what you use in your organization. And so that's going to be critical moving forward from a training standpoint. From when we look at flexibility, I hate to say it, you know, I went on vacation about 8 months ago, and my grandfather was there, and he's like, I just don't get why you can't get off your phone and why you can't stop working, and you know, you're on your phone and you're working all the time. And I looked at him and I said, well, if I don't, someone else will. Mm-hmm. And so as automation increases, our ability to do our jobs remotely also increases. So that's a good thing. But it doesn't mean the 24/7, 365 is going away. And so getting workers to, you know, how we kind of help them navigate that work-life balance and show a genuine interest in them as human beings is going to be critical for Arlington County moving forward as well. Efficiency. I look at efficiencies and how automation and how we can leverage technology in creating a more efficient worker and helping them get up to speed. One of the things that's starting to make the rounds quite a bit are, who has a Rocketbook? Raise your hand if you have one of these Rocketbooks. It's a Rocketbook. You can take notes on the Rocketbook and you snap a picture of it, and you've already decided, okay, this logo or this icon is going to send it to OneNote, this icon is going to send it to my boss's email and my email, and I snap a picture and it goes. That helps us be more efficient. How many of you, by a show of hands, have been in a meeting and taken copious notes on pages and pages of a notebook, and then got back to your desk and done nothing with those notes? We've all done that. So when I look at technology, how do we help people embrace that maybe a wearable is going to help you? You're sitting in a meeting wearing, not to plug anything, but Google glasses. And it's recording, and you get back to your desk, and what did I want to remember from that meeting? What do I need to do? So leveraging that technology. So really helping people come into Arlington County, embracing the technology and getting them up to speed as quickly as possible will be how Arlington kind of keeps us moving forward.
As much as I would like to hope that everyone stays with Arlington County for a really long time, I want to ask Ann a question, because I think the reality is in the future, and I'm going to steal a phrase that Steve had introduced to me a while ago, and I think somebody else had spoke about, you're going to see people changing jobs a lot. Yeah. And so going back to educating is, how do you help people understand the on and off ramps for getting into new jobs? And what are you doing, and what should schools be doing to help people be able to transition to new jobs and look at their skills and how they are going to relate?
I have to turn my mic back on. It's a great question. And I think it's getting back to the fundamentals. You know, I think it's really about the fundamentals. We were talking earlier about leadership, and that these basic leadership skills of, you know, being able to improvise, being able to engage people, being able to solve problems on the fly, you know, being able to have good people networking skills, these kinds of things. They're at a loss to some degree. We're finding that students more and more don't have these skills, and and they're not leaving school with these skills either. And so really I think some of it is getting back to the basics. I think some of it is really emphasizing critical thinking skills. Some of the basic liberal arts education, I think, is really fundamental and foundational in that. I think part of it is also in how we address these in a more specific kind of way. So we're doing more and more in the university with one-credit courses that focus on very specific kinds of skill sets and about jobs and advancement and transferring and the role that mentors can play in the university with that as well. So it's really thinking about more specifically about the nature of the work that our students will be engaged in and the skill sets that they need in order to navigate that as well. And not being afraid to break away from the 3-credit model 4-year approach in order to do that, and really be a little bit more creative in how we package and deliver those kinds of opportunities to students.
I think if I can, I'll pile on, because I have some heretical thinking here. I honestly believe that we may see in education a return to the liberal arts. I think that teaching philosophy, I think teaching objectivity, psychology, management. I have a friend, he once told me, I've got a new job, and I said, oh, how many people do you manage? He says, 10. Oh, what are they like? He said, I don't know, they're all robots. So let's go backwards, I think, to where humans are good, which are in the artsy side, and leave the science to the robots, quite frankly.
Actually, you know what, just to add to that, so is there anybody here who works with AI at all, or computer programming at all?
Well, they don't realize what they do.
Okay. Well, that's fine. So there are two folks. So I think you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about. But with AI, what happens is a lot of we're starting to see an emerging problem in AI. And the problem that we're starting to see is that the kinds of information that we feed in training the model is the kind of biases that we see that the AI puts out. Right. And we're starting to see things like racism, for example, or social biases, so biases that are incorporated through socioeconomic structures. And if that's part of the database that informs the AI, then the kind of decisions the AI makes are going to be incorporating those things. And there are actually studies out there that look at AI screening admission tests, admission applications, and the exact same kind of biases that this objective technology is supposed to overcome are the ones that are incorporated. So this idea of non-STEM courses, humanities, is actually extremely important, because going forward, not only is it important for us as human communities, but then how AI develops in itself. It's no longer just about mathematical and computer algorithms. It's about understanding robots, understanding human beings. What does it mean to be sick? What does it mean to have diabetes? What is the meaning of what a person is doing? And all of that is related to humanities, and almost none of it is related to a mathematical formula. The other thing with AI is when we think about artificial intelligence, we really have to ask ourselves, whose intelligence are we artificializing, right? Because then the outcome reflects that. And I think what we have in Arlington in these initiatives that Holly is leading is the capacity to define this for the rest of the country. If you do it right, then we'll see that other folks will be able to do it in a way that makes these opportunities available to everybody in the community.
If I can add on to Anne's point, when I think of the leadership skill sets, and especially empathy and the ability to look at the human element of things, and I'm a Gen Z worker. I'm not Gen Z, but if I was, and I'm coming in and I'm teleworking 4, 5, 10 days every month, if I'm coming into the workplace, I want to be surrounded by good leadership. I need that leader to make me want to come into the workplace. So I couldn't agree more with the way we have to start looking at those type of, human contact points.
Can I just make one more point too? And universities, schools, all of our workplaces, we focus a lot on trying to make our workplace diverse and inclusive. And I think this just becomes increasingly important. And it's not just about representativeness. It's about having the skills and the tool sets to navigate difference and to build on difference for creativity. And I think this is a fundamental challenge that we still face. And it goes to the point that you were making about the bias that can be built into these things. I think knowing how to live in a diverse world, being a global citizen for not only race and ethnicity and religion, but for varied ideas. We struggle with this right now in our own country. We can't, Republicans and Democrats can't talk to each other very well. So figuring out this, how to navigate and really take advantage of the creativity and the innovation that comes from diversity is a skill set that we desperately need to work on, and universities in particular.
There's a philosophical conflict right now in artificial intelligence. There's one side of the house that says, these things have to be objective. They can't see creed, race, color. They have to. So how do you get objectivity into something like this? The other side of the house says, well, if you watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, Al would have still not let them back into the spaceship because that's objective thinking, because they were going to shut Al down. So, you know, there's two sides here to the philosophical argument, and it's in philosophy and psychology and those liberal arts where these things will have to be decided for the machines to get it right.
Picking up on what Ann said about a global economy, Steve's managing partner for Gartner, and he has everybody from Canada to the United States to South America. And we tend to have this hubris that we're the best. We're doing things, we know how, we are educated the best, we know what we're doing. But you're seeing things across the...
It's bullshit.
We'll talk a little bit about that.
You know, America, I'm American, although I speak with a strange accent, right? It's bullshit. We live surrounded by water and we don't interact with other cultures. I've just come back from Brazil and Mexico, and their digital journey is way more advanced than where the United States is. The cell phone coverage in parts of Africa is better than it is in Arlington. Right? And they use credit cards to pay their bills. There's no currency. So we're not exactly leading the world in all things here, yeah, I would say.
So I want us to have an opportunity. We've heard a lot of great things. I know there's a lot more, but I also want to make sure we have the opportunity to hear from Arlington. And part of one of our purposes of this is to make sure that we don't know necessarily where technology is going to take us, but this is an opportunity for us to hear from Arlington, where would we like it to go? I'm not saying it's definitely going there, but I want to hear from you. So what I've asked each one of these panelists to do, they thought they were coming here just to be part of a panel. They didn't know that they were actually going to lead these breakout sessions. So we have different areas, and then will be one online that we're going to talk and dive into a little bit deeper to hear from you guys what you want to talk about. So in the back, I have Steve, who's going to talk about the businesses, and we expand upon what he was talking about, what what employers are looking for in employees. I have Ann is going to be right here, and she is going to be talking about education. And what we're looking at is what is the future of education. And then over here, I'm going to have Yahya speaking, and he's going to be talking about healthcare and what does it mean for the healthcare worker in Arlington. And for those who are on Twitter and online, we're going to be talking with Jason and talking about the government. So we're focusing the next 20 minutes on two main things. What do you want in the future? What do you expect the future to be like in each one of these areas? And what do you think some of the challenges are going to be? So we're going to do kind of a lightning round of breakout, and then we're going to share, we'll expand upon it. Right. So if you want to kind of sit where you are or move a little bit, I'm going to have each one of the panelists go and their scribes go, and we will have your input, which is very important as part of this event.
Thank you. I didn't stand up for the question. I was like, I didn't stand up, so I'm not standing up. So. Thanks.
All right, thanks everybody. Thank you to our Zach, you get the nicest writing award.
All right.
Tech, yeah.
Okay, now we hear the good stuff. All right, now we hear the best part of this, and that's you. We have ideas, but it's you folks who are really going to give us some of the better ideas. You're thinking out of the box, your relationships, your experiences. So why don't we start over here with Ann? in your group, and why don't we talk a little bit about, Zach, do you want to report out, or is it Ann?
Ann.
Ann.
I can report out if you'd like me to.
Please.
We had a fabulous group. I don't know, everyone in the education group, raise your hand here. This was a fabulous group, absolutely terrific. I just had to listen, and they just were at it. So we talked about a lot of things. We talked about how you prepare teachers to prepare students. So we took the kind of K through 12 leading into higher education look at things. And that was a fascinating discussion, thinking about teachers as curators of information, thinking about the life experiences of teachers and how that relates to how they prepare students. So that was a really interesting part of the discussion. We talked about the spaces where we teach and what kind of spaces do we need. I learned a little bit about the Arlington issues right now about building new schools and things as well, and what those spaces ought to look like. We talked about AI in the classroom and online, and heard from one of our students here in Arlington as well, and online education that is AI driven, even the formats of that, and how do you build in school skills of empathy and engagement and leadership when students are learning online. What is the blend that you need for that as well? So we talked about coming back into the workforce and the skill sets that you need for that, and the gap oftentimes between some job assistance and actually getting through the door, and where can you find the effort and initiative for that. So a little bit of our discussion was about higher education, but a lot of it was about feeding into higher education and what goes on in the schools and how we prepare teachers, the space, and the use of AI in the schools. So.
Any of the challenges? Did you? No challenges.
No, yeah.
That's okay.
So
That's okay.
I just want to say that our note taker did a fabulous job. It's a Virginia Tech education at work here.
Let me ask you
Very
one more
much.
question. We talk about the composition of the workforce in the future, and it's going to be a diverse workforce. A lot more seniors in the workforce than today. But we have this emerging workforce coming of the Gen Zs. Those people born after 1995 that live with devices. They don't know a day without the internet, without those devices. I drive to work every day, and I see these three young girls, it must be 8 or 9-year-old girls, getting together on the street corner. And I think back when I was a kid, and when we got together, we would push each other, kick, laugh, talk about this and that. What they've got is they see each other, take the devices out, and they're walking down the road. Those kids are coming into the workforce. Did you guys talk about that? How are we going to deal with that? Because they have a different attitude to approach. And I have a few people who are interns now for us, and they say, well, I want to be just like the workforce today. I need to telework. And I hear that what we hear is that there's a need for that tacit knowledge, that apprentice who looks at a master, the old skill, to be able to learn. And the only way you can do that is through communication and collaboration.
Absolutely.
Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we did talk about it actually, and we talked about, one of our group members mentioned tech-free Sundays, right? So leaving the phone, leaving the phone out, or leaving it at the door when you go into the school as well. And so really the need to emphasize these people engagement executive skills that are so essential, and leaving the technology out of the room for a little bit. Yeah.
One of the issues is that unfortunately I have a preschooler, and you see it on the playground, some parents, and it's talked about, and maybe I've done it. I mean, sometimes it can be a couple of seconds. Oh, sorry. But just showing an example, if you're on your digital device, your kids are going to be, and I see little 2-year-olds on iPads and cell phones, and if you start at that age, if you show them that you're doing it all the time, tech-free Sundays, or choose another day if you want.
Any other thoughts? Feel free to speak up. So I can get you.
So I think that's just the wrong way to look at it, right? I think that we need to embrace the technology. So I have a 7-year-old, and when we're out, he's on his iPad, and people are like, "Oh, you monitoring that?" That's negative. And I always say, no, he needs to be on his iPad. He needs to master the technology, right? Because he's 7 now, but in 10 to 15 years, his life is going to be based completely on technology. So he needs to master these things. And if they can master at 2, 3, 4, 5, that's even better. Because if you just think about it in the 90s, right? I was born in the 90s, so I don't know what was going on in the 90s. But everyone that couldn't type, they lost their jobs. So in 2030, the 18-year-old whose parents took away their iPad because they felt like they were using it too much, they're going to be dinosaurs, basically. So I think we need to embrace the technology because that's where we're going. instead of looking at it like it's unusual.
Can I ask you though, do you think there needs to be some kind of balance though with it as well? I mean, if their only source of information is coming through the iPad, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that, we don't want to create socially awkward people, right? So, maybe, it's unrealistic to have like an entire day without an iPad, right? Like, what are you gonna do?
It's a joke. A dystopia movie for you. Wall-E, watch it with your kids.
I'll watch it, but everything I do is on my phone, right? And I think if you actually went a Sunday without your phone, you would be like, wow, my life is way different. It's gonna be way harder just in today's society. But I think that kids interact, they just interact differently. So, for example, my son watches Nerf War. There's these kids that have a YouTube channel, it's Nerf War videos, right? They're playing, there's like a set, they're set up, their dad helps them, it's crazy. But he then goes and plays Nerf War, right? Like me or his friends. So I don't think that, for the most part, I think that you're either gonna have a personality or not. I don't know if, you being on your phone isn't gonna make you an introvert just automatically, but it's gonna make you a better, like a more functional human in 10 to 15 years.
I just want to add something to that. I think that's actually very profound. But in relation to education, I want to point out something. I think all of us, we went to school, and one of the things that we noticed is that people in our classroom, I noticed in my classroom as well, people who tend to perform in the top 1%, top 2%, they have something different about them than everybody else. Like, for example, they will study when everybody else is playing. They will read or think when everybody else is sleeping, right? They will do things in a way that's asynchronous with everybody else. I think one of the things that technology does really well is it allows connectedness in a way that didn't exist before, but it also has this way to homogenize individuals. So if everybody's using technology, then the one individual who's not using it, who's normal in our world without technology, might actually be the guy who's above the competition. So we do need to think about how these kind of in a world of technology that's ubiquitous.
Yeah, can I speak? I actually work with many students at George Mason University who have come here from other countries. And my job is to teach them to get an internship. So part of that is learning to write a business letter. What I'd like to see technology do in the future is help students like that. I certainly am not bilingual. They have great talents and skills, but one is not learning how to use our English language in a written format. So whatever happens in the education system, I hope we help them fill in the gaps the way we write English. They have learned to speak English rather well, but to communicate in a written style in the United States to get a job takes some skills. And if the education system can help them, I send them back to Writing Center and all of that. But I sort of had a comeuppance the other day when I read an email that was to seek a job, and I thought I had taught this person how to write an approach. And when I read what she wrote and saw the errors that were still in it that she probably didn't even see, it was heartbreaking because she may not even get a response. But it didn't mean she wasn't a competent applicant. It means that she didn't learn the way we write English in this country. So that really has to be part of our future.
So the fundamentals really matter.
They really matter, and the fundamentals are more than, what is a preposition? How do you make a complete sentence? How do you teach them? It's okay to read what you write out loud so you hear whether or not it makes sense. And they're so busy with their texting and all of that, they don't even know that they're not writing a complete sentence.
Thank you. Steve? This group.
So when I heard that this team was fabulous, my team is so competitive, I reached for the online thesaurus, and we are outrageously spectacular. So our exam question was, what do you want coming through the door, and what will it look like, and what do you want it to exude in qualities or qualifications or things like that? So the first we went into is we wanted to be able to communicate. I'm just using a neutral word here. But in what way? So better than we do right now. What are the laws of communicating? What are the social norms of communicating? We just don't want grunts or yeses and nos because this individual is going to have to be creative. So we have to create and ideate through communication skills. So when do we teach people how to communicate? I was saying to I can sell an ice cube to an Eskimo because I've been taught how to do that. Right? And there is a methodology, if you listen to the great narrators through Gandhi, Winston Churchill, etc., they were taught how to communicate and engage. So we think that's quite critical as we go in, because you're going to have to win an argument. Going next on to emotional intelligence. I don't think a robot can sense that you're not feeling too good when you walk through the door. Are you okay? But humans can. So how do we hone and how do we develop that sensory part of a human that's more sensitive to those very, very important indicators and warnings of senses, right? Happiness, joy, sadness, etc. Because we should leverage those or keep the good ones up, or if we know that it's going down, the bots can bring the goodness back in again through some other way. We have a dark side in our family, and I'm just kidding. We wanted to monitor the staff, their activities, their efficiency by putting chips inside them, by having cameras that track what they do, by having bots that follow them around and see where they go and how efficient they are and what they eat. But the point is, are we really maximizing the workforce whilst the workforce is at work? And let's outsource the stuff to the bots, because we do a lot of stuff that we shouldn't really be doing. You know, we have to go to the toilet, British toilet humor. Trained and trainable in skills. So don't come with a defined skill. Come with a receptivity to be able to be trained into a skill. It's a mindset, right, that we're looking for. And therefore, we're going back now into the liberal arts. We're going back into the philosophy, the inquisitiveness of acceptability. 7 years in a major company to get a change initiative through. That's what we go in and teach, that this will take 7 years. They go, nah, we'll do it in 7 weeks. No, you won't, believe me, because we're really, really bad at changing. So changing the receptivity within us to adapt is going to allow a company to differentiate and be profitable. Cultural humility, which I love. So I work in 16 countries. And before Gartner gives me another country, I go to the library and I read up about the culture. Because that is what will get you the empathy, the EQ. That is what will enhance your state. So understanding the cultural sensitivity, but also the cultural advantage that businesses can do. So I really like that one, because that is the secret sauce, quite frankly. And back to philosophy, ambassadors, going back to Aristotle's time, ambassadors understand culture. And that's where they navigate best, right, and bring teams together through that understanding. And lastly, curiosity. And this is absolutely the definite secret. We have to be curious. And we have to, how do you teach somebody to be curious? Curiosity has led us to radicalism in the past, has led us to despots in the past, right? But curiosity can lead us to amazing things. I was telling the story, Richard Branson sat me down once when I was in Heathrow. He said, got a few minutes? I said, yeah. He goes, if I develop a train, what will it look like? And we had a 15-minute discussion. And afterwards, he gave me £200, £500, I think it was. He said, that's how I'm a multi-millionaire. I harvest people's curiosity. There are no rules, and I get ideas, and I go back, and I work it all out. So, you know, that mindset, right, has to be taught. So that's what we came up with, and that's why we're outrageously fantastic as a team, I think. On the, stuff.
Thank you. So important. I mean, you hit on some points there that's so true. Comments?
I kind of feel like we've left out a big part of the future of work. A big chunk of people are going to be independent workers. They're not going to be employees. How are we going to support them? And also a lot of things that you were talking about, and why I've worked for myself for 17 years, because it has allowed me to be more curious, keep learning. It's almost like I always tell people, when you're an employee, you're in the zoo. You're told what to do, everything's scheduled, it seems secure. But I've been out in the jungle for 17 years. And the first few years, let me tell you, it was rough. But I've learned those skills to keep surviving, and it keeps me, as the work is going to change fundamentally in ways that we can't comprehend. That's a big message tonight, right? And it's going to change so much more quickly. I think people would be better prepared if we could, as a society, get people more comfortable working for themselves, because I think the idea of traditional employment is a 20th century construct. Yeah, but I mean, using the same simile, maybe these are the points of success if you were going to work for yourself, because if you could do these things, you'll be able to navigate that environment, because the bots are taking care of the routine stuff. You're not doing that anymore. Or at least, I also think corporations need to not view us as resources. Yeah. Partners now. Yeah, great point. Yeah.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's also the piece about how do you get the productivity in the workplace when you're knowledge workers and your mind somewhere else. And so you go to this concept of crowdsourcing, or where you just put everything out there. There aren't any things. They just go out and you pick up your fungible
And we also we have different productivity. There's
Yeah.
kind of one size fits all productivity. And that's, I think sometimes when you get inside a culture of a company, by default, people feel like there is this one standard.
I mean, I have a dark side to me, and I believe that we should introduce technology that tells me that your brain is not working hard enough for what I pay it to work, and I'll monitor it.
That's why I wrote it.
Yeah.
Such a good point. If Christian Dorsey was still here, he'd talk about his experiences in Germany, how they expect people to change jobs, and what the government does is provide for sabbaticals for them to retrain themselves and come back into the workforce. Again, showing that we're really not that far ahead. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Work. You guys hear me? Yeah. Yep. Okay. Oh, do you want me to take that? All right.
What is it? Sure, is it?
Okay, so I don't have a digital thesaurus, so I'm just going to make up a word. So our group was fantaculous.
There you go.
Where's our group? Charlene is here, Kate, Lizzie, Debbie, who else? Bose was here. I don't see where. Oh, there you go, Bose. Well, awesome group. And Kyle, where's Kyle? Oh, he's missing. Actually, he asked some really profound questions. Okay, so in any case, so we were looking at how will a healthcare worker keep you healthy in the future? So the way we decided to do the vision, it actually just kind of evolved organically, is to start with, to think about outcomes. What is it that we want when we think about health? What do we mean when we say a person is going to be healthy? So we start by what is it that the technology should do? And some of the things that we expect a connected community, a digital city to do is, first of all, accommodate multicultural definitions of health. If you have a multicultural community, everybody will have a different definition of what it means to be healthy. And the capacity to incorporate that into whatever the environment is doing for you or whatever is automated allows each individual to actually maintain health rather than have a definition imposed on them. The other thing we're looking at is the ability to access social determinants of health. So these are things like, and I'm embarrassed saying this in front of Kate because Kate is actually the public health expert here, but things like eating healthy foods, access to safe housing, access to job opportunities, employment opportunities, civic engagement, all of those things, the environment in which we live, work, and play are the social determinants of health. The extent to which a digital community allows access to that for each individual based on their need for different aspects of it is what would help attain health for communities. The other thing is this idea of a holistic definition. So it's not just physical health, but also an idea of mental health, this idea of spiritual health, and many other dimensions of what it means to be healthy for different individuals. And there were some considerations that we had in relation to what does this all mean when we think about cost, and a robot might cost less than a physician, then would the robot actually replace a physician in some way? And if it does, if an algorithm, if Alexa does, then will there be a better care for some individuals than others? And to what extent? But those are challenges, those are considerations that we had. The other thing too is these ideas of intrinsic motivations to people, like not just making people healthy because you're imposing health on them, but then how do you help people feel healthy? So this idea of a digital community should not only implement a paradigm of health around an individual, but help that individual want to get healthy themselves. Perhaps some kind of motivators, some kind of systems in which people and individuals and their homes communicate in a way that the individuals want to become healthy themselves.
I've just had an epiphany. Are you sort of suggesting that you could outsource or crowdsource the digital health of a community so the group enable an individual who's not quite making it to is that where you go with that?
There's actually already mechanisms for that.
Yeah?
It is one of them.
Really?
And you have encouraged, if you have a Fitbit, you can sign up to a community.
Yeah.
And that community that you can cheer each other on. A lot of times you contact through Facebook, whether you like it or not.
Oh.
You can motivate people who are not doing well. You can brag about how well you're doing, what progress you're doing.
So these are
but
control
Fitbit is only one.
Yeah.
There's actually websites where you can sign up and they give you gift cards or money for doing physical activity.
I like it. It's dirty and it's evil. Yeah, we should.
So really quickly, so at the end of the day, one of the questions that Kyle asked, I wanted to come to that. So Kyle asked this question, where if you're a healthcare worker, because the idea is, how will a healthcare worker keep you healthy in the future? Well, if you're a healthcare worker, would it be possible for them to completely be replaced by some digital technology, right? And I want to end with a story that I have when I had a patient one time that came in. And it was a patient with cancer. And he was already diagnosed with cancer. Actually, I had two of these patients. One of them was breast cancer. One of them had a previous diagnosis of cancer somewhere else. And this patient came in, previously had chemotherapy, but when they came in, they knew they had cancer again because they were coughing up blood, they were having trouble breathing, and they were having symptoms that weight loss, et cetera, that they knew they had the recurrence of cancer. But they just didn't want to go in to get checked. They just didn't want to do it. And it reminds me of my GPS. Sometimes when I'm driving and I just don't want to take this route, I want to take that route, I'll take that route, and the GPS will say, rerouting, turn left. And I'll be like, no, I'm not going to turn left, I want to go this way. And I'll keep going, it will say, rerouting, turn right. And then but it doesn't understand what it means to be a human being. So one of the things that emerged in my understanding from our discussion is that there might be aspects of what it means to be a healthcare worker that will be captured by algorithms and AI, because medical practice is becoming increasingly algorithmic. But where healthcare workers are going to shift, human beings is going to be their capacity to be more human. The extent to which we can understand other human beings as a healthcare worker is going to be the extent to which we can actually deliver care more efficiently and effectively. And the extent to which we become robots as physicians, as healthcare workers, is the extent to which we are going to be replaced. So that was our group, guys. Thank you so much.
So if I could ask the panelists to come up here a minute. Sit one more time, one more question. Sit here. Okay, Steve, could you come up a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, this is the last question.
Like all new technologies, sometimes it doesn't work.
It was a social experiment that we tried.
All right, it's 2028. President Trump's finishing his third term in office. Language of Arlington, official language is Chinese. And Arlington has been transferred and ceded to another country for a golf course. No. Let's go further than 2028. Let's talk about 2035. That's roughly 15 years ahead of where we are now, 17 years ahead. What is it today, if you look back at that, it's 2037, and you look back at this meeting, what is it that we did not emphasize enough? Or what did we not talk about that we should have talked about?
I'll lead off. It's unusual for me. Ethics. Ethics. Which the within us, we're born with them. It's a cultural thing. But ethics, none of us touched on ethics. I was really surprised. I thought you might on the medical side. I wouldn't because I'm unethical, but I thought you might. But it didn't come out, did it? So that really surprised me when I look back. The ethics wasn't out there.
You know, one thing I was really excited about hearing a lot of the comments is that, so in Arlington County, I conduct a lot of leadership coaching, and I've coached leadership at different Fortune 500 companies. And the one thing that we did hit on is those pieces of leadership that we're lacking and we're starting to see deteriorate a little bit through people. So if we could get, all of the thoughts in this room out and in play and in practice, we're going to be in a good place. Looking back, I just hope we can take what we've talked about in this room and move it forward.
So I thought your last comments were really interesting about the human side of our decision making. And I think that one of the things we didn't spend too much time on is the rational assumptions that go into a lot of AI. A lot of our systems and a lot of our processes are built upon rational decision making. It's someone's idea of rational decision making, but not necessarily the way we actually make decisions as humans. And so I think so much of this really depends on a deep understanding of why we decide the way we do, why we behave, what motivates us. I think this is really crucial and critical. It goes back to some of the discussion about psychology and some of the liberal arts, but it's also just a deeper understanding of our own behavior as humans and what motivates us. And I think AI oftentimes is built upon a false premise, a false model of how we make decisions. And I think that that's a crucial thing that we need to look critically at.
I think one of the things that I would say we might be missing in this room, but I actually think Holly must have gotten this already, knowing the efforts that she's put in it, is voices of folks who are digitally disconnected now. There might be insights that they might be able to give that we are lacking at the moment. So the capacity to bring them in might be very important.
And we have a practical example because we did one of these forums, aging in the community, and we had octogenarians in the room. And if there's anybody that's going to be digitally connected, it's probably the octogenarian community. But actually, they came up with some really good ideas. They weren't technical, but there were some really good ideas there from that. So it's a good example, right? Of that community is very powerful. The minority community, whether it be a scientific community or a religious community or an ethical community, they're very powerful and as ideators, I think.
Any immediate reaction to these comments? Anybody have? Yes.
Privacy and security is something that should come up to the topic in every single one of them. And I'm talking about privacy and security. Because going on the IA and all this technology, they're all going to keep track of us in some way. Like Google already knows every single thing about us.
I know where you live.
Facebook is in there too. So if we're going to put, I guess, technology in schools, are there going to be regulations on what can they record and what can they not? In healthcare, right, a patient, maybe the provider, the service provider can sell that information to other companies, right? So things like that, I guess privacy, it is an issue right now. And I guess it will continue being an issue when it comes to technology. And I guess we have to put a stop and we need to put boundaries, We need to, make a place where they have to stop, I guess, developing in that area. Because they're going to keep going and going and going, and our privacy is going to be damaged.
Anybody else?
I'm sorry.
Just to piggyback really quick, I always just feel like if the government wants to find me wherever I'm at, they're going to find me. So I don't worry too much about that. But do you think that AI is basically just going to take out the jobs that are commodities and everything else is going to be safe? So, for example, in healthcare, I mean, you can't really take out the surgeon, right? But can you take out the surgeon?
Yeah.
So, like a robot's going to be able to do open heart surgery?
The right leg would get cut off, isn't it? Yeah.
We can't let the government in, right?
I was just wondering your thoughts about common sense. It used to be that we were, a lot of farmers, and farmers couldn't, milk the cow 7 times on Sunday.
Right.
Procrastination, jack of all trades. You could fix anything, solve anything. And that includes, like, when we did somebody mentioned at the bus stop, 3 kids pushing each other around. Now I think you can just walk away. You don't have to resolve fights and so on. But just in general, common sense, where do you think that's going?
Over to you.
It's deteriorating. I grew up in a different part of the country. I grew up in Montana, where you relied a lot on your senses and your neighbors. And you had to, because your nearest neighbor was a mile away. And it seems to have, again, I've said this a lot, but it seems to have deteriorated a little bit. But with that, also, and we want to blame that on a kid or a child being in their phone the whole time. But with that comes, I think you were talking about this more global vision of the world. So I grew up in Montana. My world was Montana until I went to college. That's not the case anymore. I grew up in Arlington as a 7-year-old, but now my view is of the world. So there's good and bad to that.
I think I would challenge that a little bit, just to go back to my hypothesis, which I'm selling heavily here, is that the likes of Aristotle, Einstein, Copernicus used common sense to challenge what was the doctrine of the day, that the Earth was the center of the universe, or that that gravity was no such thing. So they observed it and said, that doesn't make sense. Common sense. And then they dug a bit deeper and they finally got into the science and they found that, actually we're not the center of the universe on that type of thing. So I do believe that common sense is the curiosity that's in us all the time.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I need you to go ahead. So common sense can be also loaded with biases and loaded with narrow-mindedness as well. And I think that what passes for common sense in some communities may be a bigoted and not a very good way of approaching things in others. So I think we have to be aware that common sense in terms of asking good questions, being curious, being practical, that's essential. But I think we also have to be careful of not thinking about common sense and kind of, back of the hand kind of comments or something, or ways of approaching the world that are not informed and don't have that broader global perspective as well. I mean,
I realized, I had 3 kids, and I realized when they were like 10, 8, and 6 that they didn't have street smarts. And I did. And that was just like an epiphany for me. So how could they not have what I've got? I know not to walk down that road, and they were going to walk down that road. So how can you not have the smarts that I've got? So that was really interesting to me.
I have a biological perspective on this. So if you think about common sense, and if you're approaching it from a perspective of biology, where there are pathways that are laid down through reinforcement learning, that you possibly model behavior, observe behavior, or personal behaviors and past experiences, lay them down, then that capacity to do that hasn't changed. We haven't evolved organically in a couple of generations. But what has changed is where we derive those particular reinforcements. In previous days, we would have derived them in the street, in the human interactions. But now if you derive them through massive online gaming, where we are shooting each other up, and that's the kind of world that informs our perspectives and reinforces our learning paradigms, then what's going to happen is when we get in the real world and those pathways need to kick in, then you're going to see that manifested in reality, no longer in virtual world.
Thank you. One more question?
I had one question, which is when we're heading to 2035, how do we get there, given the fact that we currently have a very fragmented connectivity? We're bound to specific companies that provide our Wi-Fi. We're limited. We're isolated. If we're rural, we don't have access to these systems. We have a long way to go in terms of just physical infrastructure to make this happen. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'll be Aristotle, and I'll say I'll take the Star Trek approach, and we should boldly go and split the infinitive. That's what we should do.
Federal Communications Commission hat here, but the FCC recently did this thing called spectrum auctions for 5G. So 5G is a level of connectivity and a type of network that is far beyond what we could even imagine. But imagine we are able to do 5G through initiatives like the one Holly is doing, where you have citywide networks. If you go to Mountain View, for example, you can sit in your car and you can connect to the Google network. At least they used to be able to do that, and I used to be able to connect when I used to visit. But imagine you can do that here with a 5G network. Then all of a sudden, this idea of fragmentation, at least in the geographies you're living, it's going to be almost a moot point. You might not be able. You might still be fragmented in terms of mobile device, but you will always be able to connect through Wi-Fi because the city will be able to accommodate that.
I'll just say, back in the days of Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson, a huge rivalry, right? Thomas Jefferson, who was Secretary of State, hired an interpreter in the Department of State, but his role was to write slanderous things about Alexander Hamilton, right? It was fake news. It was total fake news. And it was everywhere, right? And so I think a lot of the kind of concern about the way we communicate, who controls information, I think these things have been with us for a long time. I mean, I think you made this point earlier, Steve, as well. And so I'm optimistic that we'll figure it out. I also do think, though, that a lot about our geographies really define a lot of our infrastructure. And I think we're at a point where our traditional geographies and governing structures need to be rethought in some ways. By the year 2030, 89% of the US population will live in one of 11 megaregions in this country, which means that we have to figure out how to work together at a regional level as opposed to local, state. And frankly, our nation states are failing. So we need to figure out how to address a lot of the problems in different geographic scales. And I think a lot of these issues will be resolved as we start to think more creatively about how we cluster geographically and how we identify ourselves geographically as well.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So we all know now that in the future, jobs would be way less than now, and it's better and it's smart to think about to be self-employee. So beside educating ourselves and online classes or whatever we can do, so what other advice that you can provide for us to prepare for that, or to face being without job, or what we can do basically to prepare ourselves for that, to survive, I mean. Thank you.
Be Willy Wonka and use your imagination. Let me give you an example. The world's largest insurance company is the client. And I went to see them, and they wanted to hire 3 C++ senior programming engineers. And when you looked at the resume and the job description, this would be 15 years experience. So I said to them, let's do an experiment. Let's put no job qualifications down there, no age of entry, no nothing, and just say experienced C++ people required. They hired 3 16-year-olds who'd flipped high school. Wow. And that's called imagination.
I think that's going to be more in line with how things are going to evolve in the future, where it's your experience and what you've done that is more of a credential than where you've gone and what it says on a transcript. And to this idea of universities and education, somebody else mentioned, I think you mentioned about being able to do self-work, you're mentioning it as well. And I think one thing that we need to learn in universities is that failing is okay. That you try something, and if it doesn't work, then you don't give up. You get up and try again. And although we have that in our culture, if you fail once, try again, right? I mean, we all know that. But then in reality, that's not rewarded. But if we are able to integrate that into an educational paradigm, because the reality of the world is there are websites like Upwork. Are you familiar with Upwork? Everybody's familiar with Upwork, where folks who don't have jobs, they can actually go and find and be independent consultants almost. You can go to TaskRabbit, you can start your own store on Amazon and make actually lots of money. But then each of those require the capacity to take a risk and be okay with failing and trying that again and reassessing what didn't work last time and doing it again. And we used to have the spirit in Thomas Edison, who tried thousands of times, I mean hundreds of times before he actually succeeded. But we lack that as society. And I think to the extent our educational institutions can incorporate that, that will lead to successful careers in independent work.
I would just add
Go ahead.
that they hired those 3 16-year-olds, but that wasn't the problem. Do you know what the problem was? Accepting that they wouldn't turn up to work at 8:30 in the morning.
On that note, I want to say thank you very much wholeheartedly for all of you. One of the things that's...
Thank you.
This has been a fabulous conversation. And thank you guys for participating. I think one thing that's evident to me is, it's technology and the aspect of being human that's going to help us. And then kind of talking about what you were talking about, the fact that we're having this conversation and continuing to have this conversation, and that we're all curious and we all want to learn, I think we're all going to be perfectly fine in the future.
We'll be fine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You guys are the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well done.
All of you. Thank you.